everyone. It's great to be with you again. My name is Guithele Ruiz-Nicolas, your host for the GRN show. We are here tonight with another informative segment of the GRN show. But before we begin, I would like to kindly invite you to get on our social media pages, share, like, and comment. We also have our YouTube channel, the GRN show. So anything that you've missed or you want to see, you can always go back to the YouTube channel. But the topic tonight is extremely sensitive because it's very, very personal. According to a recent Supreme Court decision, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health. And that has to be determined by the patient's doctor or healthcare provider. Reproductive rights is a complex and deeply personal issue, as I've mentioned, and our guest today will address this issue and share insights as to why it is not just a woman's issue. Barbara Cady is a community activist. She's a feminist and an expert in women's studies. So, Barbara, I am so happy to have you with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Guithele. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Great, great. Well, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin with the interview. I
Sure.
looked at your background, it was pretty fascinating. How you got into women's studies?
Yes, yes. Okay. So, well, I was an everyday housewife before I went to college, and I went to college as a non-traditional student. I um I went to college when I was 52 years old in 2010. I was selling real estate and my children were getting more independent, and I just thought, well, I want to do something a little bit more informative for myself and just grow a little bit as a person. So my plan was just to go to community college for 2 years and take some liberal arts humanities courses. And I found that taking anthropology courses was fascinating. That led me to that. Anthropology is basically the study of the human experience. So that led me down the path to, well, I'm going to narrow it down a little bit to the study of women's experiences throughout time and throughout place. So I started taking women's studies classes, and that just opened a whole world to me. And there was so much I began to realize that we are discriminated against in our society. Women are second-class citizens in the United States. And I learned about some of the history and the different things that women have done that I never knew before. And it just changed my whole life. And I decided to become an activist and work for women's services and women in politics. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
That's awesome. With the ruling in Dobbs versus Jackson, Women Health Organization changed the legal landscape for reproductive rights in the US. Tell
Yes.
us a little bit about this particular case and why it's important for us to truly understand what's going on.
Yes, of course. Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health is the case that went to the Supreme Court 2 years ago, June of 2022, to challenge a woman's fundamental right to an abortion, which was codified with Roe v. Wade, and that was in 1973. So that was a case that went to the Supreme Court. The Roe was a fictitious name for a woman. She was a woman in Texas who was pregnant, and she managed to get her case to the Supreme Court. This woman did particularly have her baby. She placed it up for adoption, but this changed everything. The Roe v. Wade. Wade was the Texas lawmaker who determined that a woman's right to privacy is a constitutional right. So it was codified that a right to an abortion is part of your right to privacy, and you have a constitutional right to that privacy. So that, and there were limiting factors in that law, the language of that law. It was up to the point of viability. After around 24 weeks, then the state has some interest and can interject. So for 50 years, the states had no choice but to follow this, and women freely could go into their providers and take care of what needed to be taken care of for whatever reason up to that point. The the right wing movement to limit women's freedoms has been going on for a long time. And Donald Trump placed three very conservative justices on the Supreme Court so that this right could be taken away. And so 2 years ago, this case was presented before Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, and the conservative justices decided that it isn't a constitutional right for women to control their own destiny, their own body. So this is the first time ever that the US Supreme Court has taken away one of the United States men's rights. It's the first time it's ever happened.
Wow. And I have to tell you, in my community, the Haitian American community, the Caribbean community, when people hear abortion, it's like it's a bad word. And what they do not understand is there are times medically,
right,
not because of negligence, not
right,
because one does not want a child. Medically, it is necessary to get some procedures done to really save their lives. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that so people fully understand we are not talking about everybody, anybody, whenever they want. And it should be a woman's right. It should be the woman's right. It's between her, God, and her family. But I want people to look at the women's healthcare aspect of it.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, for so long, the stigma against women who, for whatever reason, cannot complete their pregnancy, it's always been this label, oh, lazy woman, how could you do that? But there's so much more to it than that. There's economic, there's health care, there's family and social status. Nowadays, young families, two people are working. You've got, if you've got a husband and wife or whatever kind of family you've got, two people are working to pay the bills, to bring in the money, to take care of the children. And sometimes an unplanned pregnancy can upset that cart and just destroy the whole family structure. So that's one aspect of it. But the other thing that most people have never had to think about, because for the last 50 years, if a woman was having a problem with her pregnancy, for example, we have complications all the time in pregnancy. Your water breaks too early, or you're having cramping. You would go to your doctor, and your doctor would do what was medically necessary for you and the baby, if possible. If they want to save the baby, they can, but they would do what was medically necessary, so it wasn't in the news. Now we are finding, when Texas was one of the first states, it had trigger laws in place. As soon as this ruling came down from the Supreme Court, they immediately went into effect, and women immediately started feeling the effects of this. Comes to mind, here's one particular case, and it can be looked up, it was on the news. A young woman named Amanda Zarowski and her husband Josh, they suffered from infertility. They tried for a long time, and they were so joyous to find out that they were expecting a baby girl. They named her Willow. And at 18 weeks, now mind you, Texas has a total ban on abortion, which is the direction that Florida is going. At 18 weeks, this woman's water broke. She went into her doctor's office with pain, cramping, devastated that she was losing this child. There was no chance that this baby was going to survive. But the doctor said to her, I can't treat you because you're past the limit. And if there's any kind of cardiac activity heard through we have this sophisticated equipment now, you can hear the baby's heartbeat so early. He said, there's still cardiac activity. The only thing I can tell you to do is go in your car and wait until your fever spikes. So Amanda had gotten so sick, she and her husband were devastated. So here you've got a wanted baby, a longed for, family. She couldn't go. She knew she was losing her baby, but then her medical provider says, I can't treat you. So she got very sick. She went to fever, and then finally went into the hospital. They were able to perform what they needed. They got her fever down, but she has so much damage to her uterus and tubes from the sepsis infection that she may never be able to get pregnant again. So she went public with this story, and she and other women decided to sue the state of Texas, and that's ongoing. And this is only the beginning of what is happening with women. It's starting in all these other states that are falling, one by one. It's like they're in a competition to say who can do stricter. Can I have a stricter law than this other state? Florida was actually a reasonable state. We were a state where during Roe v. Wade, we had the same law as Roe v. Wade. Then there was a bill put on the table for a 15-week abortion ban. And then in the dark of night, our governor decided to sign a 6-week abortion ban bill. Before that one was even decided, it was in the Supreme Court. The 15-week was still in effect. It wasn't even in effect yet. So what happened was when DeSantis started running, he just for president, he decided he wanted to go as more conservative than Donald Trump and beat him that way. So what happened was that law was waiting in the lurch for this other law to be approved. So just last week, the 15-week abortion ban was upheld by the Florida Supreme Court, which immediately put into effect the 6-week abortion ban, which will be in effect May 1st. But at the same time, we got this amendment signature approved to go on the ballot. So that would be the next thing I'd want to talk about. If any other questions that you might have for me about this particular situation before I move on.
Well, you've talked about Texas.
Yes.
Just so people understand, I know you said it's almost like a competition between the states to see who can have the stricter laws.
Right.
Right. Abortion. So maybe we could quickly mention them.
Yeah, well, what's happening is there's a conservative right-wing religious movement that funds campaigns. And people like Donald Trump, well, they're floating this idea of a national abortion ban if people like Donald Trump get elected. So there are some states where, it's the separation of church and state has just left. I mean, it's one of the things we were talking about at the rally. It's, not the church, not the state, a person should decide their fate. That was one of our chants that we had at Lake Eola. And the thing about this very sensitive subject is no one is saying you have to do this. I mean, we can still speak to our pastors, be true to our morals, values, be true to our church, and do what we want to do. It's about freedoms, because what's happening is freedoms are being taken away, and these decisions are being made by people we don't know, strangers in the state legislature. And strangers in a state legislature don't necessarily have medical training. They don't really understand what reproductive rights are all about. They don't really understand how a woman's body works, how a pregnancy works. So this is very bad for everyone all the way around. At the rally, so the rally for Amendment 4 was something I attended, and we are just creating awareness. It will be on the ballot in Florida. It will be on the ballot in November, and we need people to vote yes. And what it does is it takes back your right to make your own decisions about your health care, because there's unintended consequences that are just not widely known. I didn't really even know. I mean, I had 4 healthy pregnancies. They were all planned. They were wonderful. I had no problems, but many women are not that lucky. And they need to be able to go to their service providers, their healthcare providers, and expect the best care. And it's being affected by these laws. Doctors don't know what to do. They're afraid they might go to jail. They're afraid they might lose their license. And, we talked also about women of color, minority communities, underserved communities will be hit the hardest because they can't come up with the funding to travel to find a healthcare provider who's going to be able to serve them. Wow. So all the way around, it's very bad. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for the level of care we can get here in Florida. It's bad for women. It's bad for families.
I can see that. So let me ask you a question. Let's say as a woman, I am pregnant. And I like the fact you said, this is a person's choice, because it could work either way, where a doctor can say, okay, you have to terminate the pregnancy, and the person may say no.
Right.
But we're not telling people they can't do that.
Right.
But what if you go through this process, getting pregnant, and the fetus is in your body? The fetus is no longer alive. What happens in a situation like that?
Well, then a miscarriage. Nature is going to run its course. A miscarriage, within a few weeks, usually a woman will start to bleed. But it's much better to go into your healthcare provider if you suspect something's wrong. And then we have the ultrasounds. They can perform an extraction that will limit the amount of infection. It's much better, but it's always the woman's choice. I had a friend who was miscarrying, and they had said, we can do this, or you can go home. She chose to go home. Later on, she said, I'm sorry I did that because it was so very painful. But the point of choice is there when you do get bad news, you get devastating news. There's no heartbeat. That's a different story than what happened with the woman in Texas, because the fetus was still functionally living, but she had lost her amniotic fluid and infection was constant. And the doctor said, there's no way that you'll be able to deliver this 18-week fetus and have it live. That was absolutely out of the question. So of course she wanted to do what was best to save her own health so that she could have children down the road. And the state denied her that. And there was one other case, also a woman named Kate Cox, same state. She had to leave her state to go get the health care she needed. Her baby had a very extreme chromosomal abnormality. It was not going to survive, and carrying that pregnancy to term was going to be bad for her health. So she had to leave the state because the state attorney general there said, no, you can't have it. You're just going to have to wait it out. I mean, these are the most absurd things. So the whole level of care for women's reproductive health is going into a terrible area because nobody knows what to do.
Yeah, we're reversing back decades.
We're going back, and like Arizona has just upheld a law from the Civil War, some kind of draconian law that doesn't allow, women cannot do anything when it comes to their pregnancies. They have to, it's just absurd. All of it. So this is what's happening. Once that fundamental right, that constitutional right, was taken away with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it is now up to whomever gets elected in whatever state legislature to come up with some kind of crazy idea. I heard one legislature, I don't know who it was, on TV, I'm watching, this is on the news all the time, say, well, it's not really such a big deal to have to get on a bus and go get your abortion. How often are you going to have one? Like, this is the kind of attitude. They do not understand.
Now, would they do that? Would they allow their wives and their daughters to do that?
Exactly, because it just shows you that they don't have an understanding of what this is all about, that pregnancy can be very dangerous for some women, and they need to be able to rely on their healthcare providers to focus only on their health, not worry about what law or what the board of directors of the hospital is going to say. And that's what's happening. So it is really compromising care. And the women who suffer the most, of course, are the underserved community women from lower incomes. There are some support services available for women who have to travel, but they have to leave their job. It affects the whole family. At the rally, there were fathers speaking about what they were going through with their wives, and how grateful they were for all of us who went around to get this signatures required to get this amendment on the ballot. This amendment is going to protect families in Florida. It's going to take the destiny of families in Florida out of the hands of a state legislature who knows nothing about what it means to struggle. And it's going to put it back into the hands of the individual, where it should be.
And that's where it should be. It is our choice. It is our body. And it's up to us to decide. But anyhow, we're going to take a short break, and we will be right back.
So this is one of our willow boxes. This is just filled with some of the things that we had started gathering for her while I was pregnant.
Yep.
There's her little baby book. This is the outfit that she was gonna maybe wear home from the hospital. All of these This is the blanket that she was in. And these are her little footprints. It's okay.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
That's great. That's Amanda Zarowski, the woman I was talking about. That's her.
All right, we are back and we have with us Barbara Cady, who is a women studies expert, and we're talking about new laws that are spreading throughout the country in regards to women's health care and women's rights to abortion. So, Barbara, I think you've touched on it a little bit about some of the social implications. What are some of the other implications that may that may be a result of these laws that are spreading throughout the US?
Well, for Florida,
Social, political, economical.
Right. So for the state of Florida, which is where we live, and this amendment that's going to be on the ballot in November is going to affect so many things. First off, we really believe it's going to increase voter turnout because this is a very hot item, not just with one political party, with people across the spectrum, because of all the things we just talked about, how it limits, health care. The other implication is that when a medical student is in school and they're learning the different areas of medicine, they're not going to want to choose OBGYN. That's going to become, a red flag. Well, the laws are so strict about this. I don't know if this is an area I want to go into because of the dangers. I might lose my license if I don't do the right thing. So it's really affecting the education of our future medical students. I read an article about one particular possibility is if abortion, how to do an abortion is banned. This will be something that a new OBGYN will not know how to do in case of an emergency and something has to be done to save the mother's life. There's going to be limited skill on that. So the whole thing, it's affecting the training. It affects economic situations of families that are already struggling with Florida. The way our inflation is so much worse than other places in the United States. Our insurance is high. The last thing, a family member needs to worry about is to have to be forced to give birth when they can't afford one, or if they can't. And birth control is that's another whole topic. That is if we allow this trend to continue, where each state is limiting a woman's right to her own destiny, her own reproductive choices, that's the next thing that has been talked about. IVF is also being talked about, the in vitro fertilization, which helps so many couples who struggle to get pregnant. Louisiana wants to ban that. There will be a national abortion ban if we allow this to continue, and if we don't reelect Joe Biden. I know this isn't about politics, but we're at a crossroads here. We have one party that wants to ban abortion across the whole country, and then we have another party that wants to restore freedoms to the people. That's what America is. That's why people come to America, to enjoy the freedoms of being a free and individual person in charge of your own destiny. We're in a very dangerous time where those freedoms are being taken away.
Yeah, it's almost like an oxymoron. Here we have issues with birth control, with IVF, and at the same time, we are legislating laws that are totally opposite.
Totally opposite. It's true. They really don't understand what they're doing. So we have to take the power back. And that's why so many people came out in Florida, and I was one of them, to go across the state. We all, in our regions, we got over 1 million signatures on these petitions. This is how democracy works. This is called a citizens initiative, this ballot amendment. Voters across the state of Florida indicated they wanted this on the ballot. They want to have this choice. And so we collected over 1 million in, I think, 9 months' time, 8 months' time. It was unprecedented. So now it appears on the ballot, and then we need 60% of Florida voters to vote yes on Amendment 4 for it to become law. And there's nothing the state can do about it because that's part of our rights. It's a very difficult way to get a law passed. Normally, you elect a representative who has the same goals that the community has, and they pass laws that are good for the community, but that's not happening now.
Mhm.
So we've got this amendment on, and we've got some others as well that people decided they wanted.
Now, you've touched on something, and people are getting married, women are getting married at a later age, they're pursuing careers. And
Mhm.
very often, I find young couples sometimes are struggling to have children. I know so many who decided to go with, IVF. Can we talk about that a little bit? How the ban and how the new laws are preventing couples
I
from
don't
that?
believe it's actually been passed. Any laws
Okay.
preventing IVS have not been passed yet, but the discussion is in Louisiana. That particular senator was talking about it. Um, I don't remember his name. The senator was on the news and he was saying, well, IVF, it's not natural. And there are some people who freeze embryos. I mean, the technology is
Of
amazing. You
course.
can fertilize the eggs and freeze the embryos. Then there was some talk about if you choose an embryo to implant, you have to choose them all. So that's something else they're talking about. Well, you can't discard any of these embryos because they want to create personhood. So these are all things that I don't think any of these people thought about. So there are some people who are like, I've got to move my embryos out of Florida or out of Texas or out of Alabama because the law's going to be passed that I'm going to have to carry all of them. I mean,
Oh my
it's absurd.
goodness.
It's absurd. It's crazy. It's really gotten out of hand. This one overturning of Roe v. Wade, they just said it was, oh, it's not going to be terrible. It's just going to go back to the states. Well, we have 50 states and we have 50 different state legislatures. And people who are in the state legislature are not necessarily qualified to make decisions about this, but yet there they are. And don't forget, we have the racism and we have the Southern, the women's sexism. I mean, the South is a tough place for people of color and for women. They have a little bit more freedoms up in the North, but we have the right to live wherever we want to live, and we have the right to take our rights with us.
The last couple of years have been really tough. When you look at, I have my grandchild who's 8 years old, and, history is the kind of thing at that age you really want to get them
Sure,
into.
sure.
And, the schools are limited as to what they can teach them. So I find every opportunity I have, here, let's do this project, let's read about, but not every parent can do that. Not every grandparent can do that. So again, I find that we are living in a time where they really want us, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, we are digressing.
We
We
are. We are.
all the gains we've made, we are last couple of years, we've lost quite a few.
Yes, there is a fear of, the great replacement theory because of the migration. The world is in a turmoil now, and we have migration, and people are coming to our borders and they're seeking asylum. And that's a good thing for America. Yes, we need control. Yes, we need to have order at the border and get, people have to be qualified and all that. But the fear mongering that is going on is just unbelievable. I don't know what this is all about, but there is a rise in white supremacy. There is a rise in this leaning towards Nazism, and in the southern states are where I'm seeing it most. So it does concern me. And so working on this one issue of bringing back rights for women's reproductive health is important, but we also have to make sure that we elect people who understand what a wonderful country this is and that immigration is what made it that way.
Mhm.
And so and equality for all, we're fighting for that I got involved in politics in Florida in 2016 when I came here right after I got my degree in women's studies and I started working in Hillary Clinton's campaign. And there was so much hope, and I met so many wonderful people, and we were all so happy and looking towards the future after 8 years of President Obama. It looked great, and then things have just been going spiraling out of control ever since. But I think this issue is going to stop them in their tracks. People are sitting up and taking notice. I think we are going to just keep talking about it and bring out the voters, and we have to change things. We have to stand up for our rights. We can't be having our rights taken away from us.
Absolutely not.
Supreme Court has, for the first time, did that. Never before. So that's a bad sign.
From your mouth to God's ears, Barbara. I really thank you so much for breaking it down so clearly for us. So it's fascinating. And I truly hope that, when we look at issues, there are many times people look at themselves, this is my issue, this is how I feel. But we've got to begin to think of for the good of all,
the good
not
of
just for ourselves. And I think this is one of those issues because it could be our daughter, it could be our cousin, our sisters who may be faced with a medical dilemma. It's like the woman in Texas. And what do we do? So again, thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate the information, and we got to get out there and really prevent us from going back to decades. So,
absolutely. So vote yes on Amendment 4. And thank you so much for having me, Guithele. I really enjoyed this opportunity. So you're the best. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And to my viewers, we're going to take a very short break. We will be back.
To learn more about what we do, to get involved in our mission to help all of Broward's children learn, grow, and thrive, or to find a program or service for your children, visit us at cscbroward.org. Children's Service Council of Broward County. Our focus is our children.
This segment is not to debate whether abortion is right or wrong. It is a very personal decision, and it is important to understand a mother's life can be at risk if they do not get the necessary health care. In many states, healthcare providers are faced with the dilemma of treating a woman to save her life or to apply the necessary procedure, whether it is a D&C or she needs to remove an unhealthy fetus out of her womb. So again, I see this as an issue. It is not a woman's issue because it affects family. It is not a Democrat or a Republican issue because we have women of all party affiliations who may be subject or who may need the necessary health care. So as Barbara mentioned, this is an issue that will be on the ballot here in Florida in November. So think about your decision. If you are faced with the dilemma of ending a pregnancy, it's between you and your God and your family. So you might want to seek the proper advice and not just look at it from the perspective of terminating a pregnancy because your life may be at risk. And I think those are some of the critical things we must think about. So I hope you have found this segment informative. It is a very hot issue, and we want to make sure that people truly understand the various aspects of the issues as we're approaching the elections, and also as the states, as they change in putting different types of ban throughout the nation. So again, I really thank you for joining us this evening, and until next time, you have a wonderful Saturday night. Good night.
To learn more about what we do, To get involved in our mission to help all of Broward's children learn, grow, and thrive, or to find a program or service for your children, visit us at cscbroward.org. Children's Service Council of Broward County. Our focus is our children.